Well, Lamar, though, you're now 10-1 in your career against the Bengals. Bengals fans do not like seeing you. What is it about
I don't like
that?
seeing them either. The record can be 10-1, but it's always a dogfight with those guys.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, the defense, the offense is always a battle, and I'm always gonna look forward to it.
Yes, that is the voice of Lamar Jackson. Unbelievable Thursday night football game tonight. The Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati Bengals put on an absolute show, going punch for punch. Really, like thunderous uppercut for thunderous uppercut. This the second instant classic between these two rivals in the past month. But the second showdown ended the same as the first, with the Ravens finding a way to escape with a last-second win against the Bengals, a victory that reaffirms Baltimore as the top dog in their division and perhaps dooms a Cincinnati team that seems way too talented and way too fun to watch to be irrelevant by Thanksgiving. My goodness. Dan Hanzus here with Marc Sessler and Justin Graver. Heat in that call. Ravens 35, Bengals 34. Mark, is really not much else you could ask for from an island game.
Well, especially on Thursday night. And the Bengals, to me, if you're a fan of the Bengals, like they're a mixture of intoxicating and frustrating. You've lost this game. It might have been your season, and yet your quarterback is playing like a legit MVP candidate. 428 yards. You've got Jamar Chase with 264 yards on the night. Like, your stars on offense are absolutely devastating. And they've been great against the Bengals time after time. And this kind of just takes me back to the Chiefs-Bucks game that we talked about just a couple of days ago, where it comes down to a 2-point conversion, where Todd Bowles, the more conservative nature oriented coach, doesn't go for two. Tonight they do. Zach Taylor and the Bengals, and they don't get it. But it's like I think that's exactly what they should have done at the end. Would you agree with that? It's like I don't love the way the play played out was not great, but that happens on 2-point conversions. But absolutely, you go for it. You don't want to give the ball back to Lamar Jackson in this game this evening, and it didn't work.
It's a no-brainer, and it's the same. Like, if it's interesting because we were talking about it on our Tuesday show, Mark, and the one thing that I imagined as a Burrow fan was that the one thing I want Burrow to do before this game kicked off was go into Zach Taylor's office, walk in and say, "Do not take the ball out of my fucking hands this time," because that's what Zach Taylor did in the first matchup, and they got conservative in overtime, missed a long field goal, and then got beat after a long Derrick Henry run. So this was, I don't know if that conversation happened. Probably didn't. Be awesome if it did. But that's exactly what Zach Taylor did here. He said, "My offense is having a special night." Joe Burrow, I totally agree. He could be the first MVP to not make the playoffs. I don't know if that's actually true, but it probably is.
He's like an Archie Manning on this team in this situation.
He's unbelievable. I mean, he is just such a perfect quarterback, and such a dog, and such a guy that steps up in the crucible moments and loves the spotlight and performs better. And Jamar Chase, he has the perfect partner to do this damage. And remember how the season started with Jamar Chase, like, pay me, come on, treat me like the other teams treat their true number ones. Like, what else do you need to see from Jamar Chase? 11 for 264, 3 touchdowns on 17 targets. Justin, you did some digging during the end of this game when Chase was obviously just taking over the world. And what did you come up with?
I was just curious because I was like, dang, this must be the highest single game output of the year. So I went week by week looking at the receiving leaders, and what I found was that not only was this the single most receiving yards in a game this season, Jamar Chase has the top 2 most receiving yards in a game this season. This obviously was the first one, 264 yards against Baltimore. In week 5, Jamar Chase had 193 yards against Baltimore. Those are the top 2 highest yardage outputs for a receiver in a game this season, both by Jamar Chase, both against the Ravens.
And I saw floating around on Twitter that this massive game actually nudges him ahead of Justin Jefferson in terms of the all-time leaders for yardage per game. So I think maybe it's time for Chase to get a little bit more love. I know Chase is widely understood to be a superstar, but I feel like he doesn't come up enough in the conversation of the best wide receiver in the league. And he deserves it. And this was a reminder. And let's talk about the 2-point conversion at the end, Mark. So I was totally cool with the call. It made a lot of sense to me. Cincinnati, for all the beauty of their offense, could not stop the Ravens once they got their machine going after the Chase Brown fumble in the third quarter. So what you had to do there is do the same thing I was saying about with Bowles and on Monday night, which is if you kick the extra point, you need to stop them at the end of regulation. And even if you do that, you could lose the coin toss, and you might have to stop them twice before you get the ball back.
2 times, yeah.
Yeah, so give yourself the chance to steal the game. What we didn't love, I think we all noticed this, Mark, was they got in the formation for the 2-point conversion, had Chase, and it's got to go to Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is having one of the all-time nights ever. He is singled up on the far side of the screen, and Zach Taylor is the one that calls timeout. And when they come out of that, they change to a different formation, and eventually you see Jamar motion back to get to the left, but it just seemed like they overthought it. And this is before we're going to get to the officiating, which was atrocious and embarrassing for the league, or it should be. But I don't know how you don't target Jamar Chase given what we'd seen between Burrow and Chase in this game.
You've got the timeout situation, because I think you could have just, gone quick dart to the best player on your team and worked that situation out. But instead, you call the timeout, you come out of it. And I thought there was they said it on the broadcast, and I agree, a pretty clear defensive holding on Mike Gesicki on the actual 2-point play too. And you're right, we'll get to the officiating, but it's like that wasn't called, and they were furious about that. So that's your breakdown. But it's the flip opposite of, we're killing bulls for not doing it, but then you do it. And if you're Zach Taylor, you have to explain what happened on a failed 2-point. So there's no way out of hell on these situations, and that really was, I thought the Bengals, it's not their season because they can still climb back into this, but you've been swept by Baltimore at this point. Like that's just the last thing you needed to happen, and yet you look like the most competitive opponent to Baltimore of anyone they've faced. So it's a confusing and a conundrum scenario, but this is a powerful team that's in a really tough place record-wise.
Yeah,
because of that decision.
Yeah, and I think Zach Taylor probably had, and we're going to hear from Taylor in a second, no problem going up there and explaining his thought process, because I'd much rather die on my shield,
right,
as the Bengals did, rather than play it safe as Todd Bowles did. So yeah, I didn't like the play call, because you absolutely have to let Jamar Chase settle things in that spot, and let
no one
him
was
win
open on that
1-on-1.
play though, because I went and watched that 4 or 5 times. There was no hey, Burrow should have done this tomorrow morning from what I saw.
Right,
it's
but you know what? Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow working together, you could throw a guy open.
Yeah.
I just give him the opportunity, and he never looked his way.
Yeah, he didn't even look at him, which was
Right.
crazy. It was as soon as the snap, I don't know if Burrow was oh, the coverage is this, I got to look here, or what the play call is. But if the play call is not Jamar Chase is the primary read, and you work to get him the ball somehow, if it is the coverage, you run some, I don't know. I'm not a football expert, but man, it's crazy.
It's an
they didn't even
overthink.
look
You
at
don't need to be a football expert to know that ball's got to go to Jamar Chase in that spot. Let's listen to an obviously deflated Zach
you are
Taylor,
a football expert, in my opinion,
after the Bengals fell to 4-6. Yeah, Justin, come on, bud.
Zach, what was the thought process on the 2-point conversion?
Came here to win. I'm here to win.
Attaboy.
But we expected to come in here and win, and we did everything we could to do that. Doesn't change the fact that I'm proud. I think everybody on that field fought, gave us a chance. Lost the game on the road to a good team, and it's sickening that this has happened twice to us. That's what it is.
All right, and now let's talk about it. And God bless you, Al Michaels, because another announcer might hold his tongue because he wants to stay in business with 345 Park Avenue. But Al Michaels says after a replay of that final 2-point conversion, which shows that tight end Mike Gesicki was clearly held by a Baltimore defender, and after the foul throw of Joe Burrow, he gets raked across the face, which is a penalty that gets called every week in the NFL. You cannot hit a quarterback across the face mask. They call that unnecessary roughness. That's a personal foul. So that should have been a redo of the try, half the distance to the goal, and yet no laundry comes out. And Al Michaels said, too many games end this way. They just do. It's so frustrating for the fans. And it is. And like for people that are impartial on this, like the three of us, it's really annoying. I mean, now just selfishly as a podcaster who's talking about the game on Thursday night, I just wanted to talk about how I just watched two surefire Hall of Fame quarterbacks at their apex balling out. And how fun that was. And instead now we're going to now shift, Mark, as we too often do, into the why can't the NFL officials stop choking in big moments portion of the big game conversation. Take it away.
And I think what is the most flummoxing or frustrating part of it is that whenever we talk about a big call that happened like tonight in this game, this Island affair, the same exact thing to even a more flagrant nature or intensity would not be called in another game on Sunday at 10 a.m. Here on the West Coast. So it's like if it was literally done by super robots that we get it, they're absolutely perfect. Like there'd be no argument. It's just that it's so subjective, it's so human, and it really does seem like different officiating crews. Well, there's also when last week 2 players were ejected, right? It's almost like there's obviously these phone calls happening during the week about emphasizing certain things and raising awareness of certain types of infractions and calls. And then it goes away. And then it's like, there's just this inconsistency. And what happened tonight to me is it seems we talk about it more on the Island games because we're all watching them, but it's very frustrating. Like that was a legit infraction. And then the answer, I think the other thing that is hard to deal with is there's zero accountability. You can't reverse it, and you just have to sit with it. Like the Bengals fans just have to sit with it, and you're lost. You have no power as a fan, and the team has no power, and they in fact can't even say anything about it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the first matchup, that was the 41-38, that ended with a Justin Tucker chip shot field goal after the long Derrick Henry run that came after the missed kick by Evan McPherson. But what allowed it to get to that point was a fourth downfield throw by Lamar, where it was very, very questionable whether it was a pass interference, but they threw the flag to continue that game. And that was frustrating because we ended up having a lot of conversation about that. And it's just like, the problem is, what is the solution? Because I don't think the solution is like what you hear as a baseball fan. There's all this talk about robo-umps and replacing umpires and how that can change the game. And there's reasons that you would want to do it, but also reasons why you don't want to do it. And there's the idea of tradition involved and all that. This is a different situation where it's like, for me, it's about pace of play. And if you start making everything, eye in the skying everything, it's probably just going to bog down football. So really, the other way to do it is these guys just got to be better. And they just got to be better. Like if the players are raising their game in these huge moments, then the officials also have to be that much sharper. And if they're not, get them the hell out of there and find some guys that can actually rise to the challenge, because from a layman perspective, it just feels like these guys are choking in the moment. And this is also a possibility, Mark, it's like, are they calling these 2-point conversions differently? Are they purposely not throwing flags because they're doing the whole let them play mentality? And if that's the move, that's not right either. It's like that play should have been obviously we should have gotten a redo of that play, and it does put a stain on an otherwise instant classic. And it just, I don't know, as a football fan, like I'm actually surprised how pissed off I am about it. Like it pisses me off. And I know I'm not alone, and I can't even imagine if it was my team, how I would feel. So shout out to Cincinnati.
I feel more heightened about it tonight too, based on the fact that like I'm watching a Bengals team that I think kind of could go to the Super Bowl if they didn't like start so slow and be
if they
so
didn't get
funky.
swept in this like
right, like it just seems like
absurd
a wasted opportunity on some level with them, but like I feel like these
hold that thought, Mark. We got to take a break.
We
got to
will
take a break, and then we'll be right back. We'll continue.
Heed the Call with Dan Hanzus and Marc Sessler is on Underdog, so why not start playing on Underdog today? It's not just NFL. The NBA is back. You've got NHL, college sports, so many options, so don't miss out. Download and play on the Underdog app, sign up with the code HTC, and receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Make the most of this NFL season by playing along on Underdog for our U.S. audience only.
All right, we're back. As you were saying, Sessdog.
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like some of these officiating crews, and again, it's like I'd like to go spend like 2 years researching this so that I could speak with more authority than a guy like in his apartment room. But like, I would say that on some level,
What
it
is
feels
with the
like,
two of you? Just you keep negging yourselves. You know, you're supposed to present
I think it builds.
yourselves
I think
as
it builds an
authorities.
authenticity with the audience. Like we're not acting like we're. But I would just say this because I feel like each crew is kind of like you had like 8 friends when you were a kid, like 8 guy friends. And every time you go to their house to eat dinner or sleep over, hang out, like it's a very different environment. And that's how I feel about these crews. It's like they're not like I kind of do want them just to be robots or tech at this point or AI because it's like I get it, you're humans and like there's a human element and that was cool in 1982, but now I'm annoyed by it. Like you're too human for me. I want robots. I want I'm annoyed now. I want accuracy. And I feel like we're dealing with human frailty in 4 or 5 major situations every Sunday. And that's a little ponderous for a fan of a sport.
My take on it is, and maybe this is crazy, tell me if I'm wrong, Dan, because I know you said you don't want to bog down the game, but as fans watching it, we saw one replay. We're like, oh, that looks like a hold. And then we see one other angle, and it's like, that was definitely a hold, right? That took 15 seconds of replay. It doesn't have to be the official running over to a monitor. They don't do that anymore anyway. Have somebody in a booth in New York, and it only applies in the last 2 minutes, so you're not bogging down the entire game. And you review it in less than 30 seconds, put up a little sidebar progressive commercial or some shit that the NFL loves to just insert ads into everything, and come back to the game with the correct call. And I feel like it might bog it down a tiny bit more than it is right now, but at least we're not having a 10-minute discussion on a podcast about how bad the officiating is.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I went this past weekend. I was in Texas, and I was at the really great, speaking of instant classics, Baylor TCU game that went down to the final seconds with the Bears winning it on a field goal. And there was a moment in the game where on the far goal line, the referees stopped down the play and they had to go review it. And the referee, you see him waddling 70 yards in the opposite direction in the middle of a full stadium to look at a tiny screen at the opposite 30-yard line. I'm like, wow, I guess the pros are ahead of the college game on this replay tip. So, yeah, maybe there is a way to streamline it. For what it's worth, Joe Burrow, this is a tweet I'm seeing from Cameron Wolf, our old colleague. Joe Burrow said he's never really felt like he's got hands to the face penalties, so he doesn't expect them, and noted there were a few times that were close, but he doesn't expect those calls to happen. So, Burrow's taken the high road there, but we've seen those calls happen a million times before. So, back to the game. Again, see, that was an annoying thing. We just had to talk about all that. The game was great. And it's so disappointing for Cincinnati because, again, their margin of error now is so slim, and that's their fault. Every time they do these bad September starts, it makes these type of losses that much worse because you just have no room for error at this point. But, they play really well in this game. They take a 14-7 lead into half. Like we said, Burrow is locked in from jump. They're up to 21-7 with the ball. And then hot damn. Like, we could talk about the officiating and everything else, but that Chase Brown fumble changes the whole game, Mark. And, we've talked a lot about Burrow and his excellence, but we have to, again, talk about Lamar Jackson now, because once they cracked that door open, and it went from, after it was 21-7, and the Ravens then punted down 21-7, they're getting booed in that stadium. Like, that, you know what it really felt like to me, Mark? It felt like so many Ravens playoff losses at home, where they're just not getting it going, and everyone keeps on waiting for them to go, and they don't go. And I'm like, is this going to play out in this way? And the Bengals are going to get the big win that they've been looking for? But that fumble changed everything. And Lamar, to his credit, on a day where Derrick Henry was held in check, was an absolute monster in the second half. He finishes 25 of 33 for 290, 8.8 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no picks. His output is just outrageous, and he makes every play in this game down the stretch, including with some help from Tylan Wallace on that tightrope touchdown down the sideline, where I do not know what the Cincinnati defense was doing. Captain Lou Amaruno's got to clean some things up this year, but you got to give it to Lamar and the Ravens offense, which really was unstoppable once they got rolling in the second half.
I'm so with you on the concept that it felt like what a January loss a couple months from now would look like. But this does feel like a different Ravens team. And tonight, I think we saw that. And, tucked inside an event-packed game, his run down to the 1 yard line, Lamar Jackson, was one of what had he scored, because I think that's part of it. Like, that would have been arguably like a top 3 play of the year by any player in the NFL. Like, there is no one that can do what he can do. And the defense stepped up. Now, they've got issues. Like, they obviously gave up a ton of passing yards, but they stopped the Bengals on downs twice, and that huge fumble recovery of Chase Brown. Like, Lamar talked about that fumble recovery galvanized the entire team, and I think brought them away from that place of, here's just another Ravens type of loss. And this is, I think, under Todd Monken, he also talked about after the game that being in this offense 2 years in, where a lot of the same players are here, and some new ones, but a lot of the same players, like, they just feel that much more confident and in structure and ready to roll. And they find their way out of dark corners. And I would say I feel more hopeful about this Ravens team in the concept of a playoff heat, a couple of games in the playoffs, than really any other Ravens team since, like, the Joe Flacco Super Bowl team. This feels real to me.
I'm not totally on board. I was today.
What would stop you? Like, what
bit.
Would stop you? Is it their defense though? Because, like, what would stop you?
Oh,
because,
yeah. The defense.
I get that, but
a train wreck. Like, the defense was entered this game last in the NFL in pass defense, just gave up 428 yards to Burrow and 264 to Jamar Chase.
But they still survived, though. Like, I think this team survived.
But they didn't survive.
These disasters.
But I'm just saying, like, okay, the problem is Lamar as Superman can get them out of anything, but Lamar has never been Superman in January. So, like, he needs help. Every time they ask him to do it all, they seem to fall short in the end. And if they go into the playoffs needing him to be the guy he was tonight on a cold day in January against one of the best teams in football, like, you might have the similar problem. They need to fix something here, and now the trade deadline is passed, so there's no help coming from the outside. The Kyle Hamilton injury is also something to keep an eye on here. He turns his ankle in this game. He's their best all-around defender. I'm seeing a report from Jameson Hensley on ESPN that the injury is, quote, not deemed serious. That's huge, because if he took Hamilton out long-term, I'd be in a total panic about the Ravens. And when I say panic, I don't mean panic like, I think the Ravens are going 13-4 or whatever. Like, but I'm talking about the old Steinbrenner doctrine, Mark.
Yeah.
Anything
I hear you.
less than a world championship is considered failure here. And this defense is not the stuff of championship teams. So, this is on Zach Orr. This is on John Harbaugh. This is on the players in that locker room to figure this out, or I just feel like they're doomed. Derrick Henry is the one thing, actually, that makes me a little more confident that they can through ball control in January, maybe find a way through. But if they have the worst defense in the league, that's gonna lead to problems that are gonna cost them again.
Yeah, I think the other, I don't want to overrate this, but we track this maybe more heavily than other shows. But when you get like Justin Tucker missing an extra point, and it's kind of like Justin Tucker was like money in the bank, like obviously for a decade.
He's not
plus,
having a good year.
Right. And so I think it's just kind of like
last year either. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just another little factor that can play into it. And I hear you. I think the defense is, especially if there are injuries, their secondary is a major concern. There's just, and I'm like the last person that wants to concede this typically, but there's something a little bit different about this Ravens team than last year or the year before when I had very little belief. By
the way, we could go back to November last year, and it could have been you or it could have been me. Probably said the same thing. I'm just saying,
I don't know if I did, because I wasn't on the.
This is not a team without an Achilles heel. That's all I'm saying. Like, and there have been teams. Last year's Ravens team was way more balanced, way better than this team, and they got picked off. So why should I believe that this less balanced Ravens team is going to be okay? It's like because Lamar is more of an MVP this year than he was last year. It's like,
well, I think because you could. There's a world where Derrick Henry runs for 375 yards in 3 playoff games, and you've got more weapons on offense. Like I think that's the difference.
He could be an X factor.
Yeah, I think like we're getting like the Derrick Henry we didn't expect, and I think that matters a lot. And he is alpha as they come, and that happens in January. So I'd point to that as a difference. The defense is concerning.
Got to stop somebody. I mean, what did that fumble by Chase Brown? Brutal. So.
That is a stop, though. That is you are creating a play there. They stopped them on fourth down a number of times. They stopped the 2-point conversion.
It wasn't like Chase Brown dropped the ball. Like Marlon Humphrey got in there and said, "I'm taking this from you." Like that is a play that he made.
Understood, Mark. I think that's the point you were making. I get that. Like,
well, that's one of your bingo plays that you were discussing on our Thursday show right there. That's a play.
How about you? Like, usually we save this for the following week, but how about Sessdog nailing there will be a 400-yard passer and 200-yard receiver in literally the first game of the week? That's pretty good, my friend.
It is. And Justin came up with this Fugazi argument that I didn't get it because I said that it wouldn't happen in the same game. I said it didn't have to. But secondly, when that happens, because first of all, my hideous
Well, we'll check the wording in the tape, and next Thursday we'll circle back on it.
No, but like my hideous football team is on bye. And so when this happens, I've already gotten my fearless prediction. I know that my fantasy team is going to go romp some lost civilian this weekend, and we go from there. Like, it's just like all the small things that don't really matter, little side bets, little personal things, they come into fruition.
I'm really happy for you. That's good.
You are not, and that's what's the great thing about this is that I'm out on an island. I am.
All right, so that's that. Let me just check out this Bengals schedule. Man, they got boned. It's almost like the football gods should have been cool to just have them split this home and home, and then we could do all our little fun things. Oh, and I can't wait for the rubber match in January. Like, that's what the conversation should be right now. But
yeah,
unfortunately for Cincinnati, the football gods were not with them. They have at Chargers, home Steelers, at Cowboys, at Titans, home Browns, home Broncos, at Steelers. They are 4-6. They need to get to 10, so they got to go 6-1.
No, they won't.
With a quarterback as special as Burrow, I don't say it's impossible, but it ain't looking good. You kind of had to have this one.
Well, you can't just not try for half a season, then say hey, here we go. Let's start the engine and go pull the car out of the driveway. A little too late.
They're only 1 win back of the 6th seed. Now, granted, they've played 10 games, and the Chargers in the 6th seed have only played 8 games. The Broncos have played 9 games. They also only have 5 wins. They're only 1 win back of the wild card. I know they just played an extra game, but it's not over.
And can I push back a little bit on the narrative that Sessdog's peddling because he's high in his own supply after his fearless prediction? And
Well, no,
you're
but
not alone on
I
this.
also attempted to fork the Bengals last week and felt foolish for it, but now feel smarter for it.
Now that we have the benefit of a little hindsight, let's look back at that start of the Bengals season where they, quote unquote, as Mark said, weren't trying. All right, granted, losing at home to the Patriots was horrendous. I mean, Jamar Chase didn't even play or was like half a man in that game, but that can't happen. Week 2, they lose 26-25 to the Chiefs at Arrowhead. Okay, I mean, that's... Then week 3, they lose 38-33 to the Commanders, who are 7-2. That doesn't seem so horrible, right? Then they beat the Panthers. Then they lose 41-38 in overtime to the Ravens.
Well,
I'm just saying, like, those are 3.
I think on this show we should peddle my narratives, not undress them. So
Let me just see. Was it lipstick on a pig the Commanders lost? Let me just take a look at the scoring summary here. Okay.
The Chiefs' loss was a game-winning field goal at the Horn. So,
well, but
yeah,
the
Commanders
like I said
game,
before, that's why they're frustrating though. Like they could have 6-7 wins right now. Like this is the problem.
Yeah, it's tough.
Was the Commanders game that Terry McLaurin touchdown at the end that basically sealed it?
Correct. That made it 38-26 with 2:10 to play, and then they got a late touchdown to make it 38-33. So anyway, it's beside the point. But it's not like they were just getting beat by a bunch of ham and eggers. They turned out to be 3 of the 5 best teams in football that beat them. But hey, you got to find a way to win.
It was incorrect.
Got to find a way to win some of these games.
It was wrong of me to suggest that's how that went down. But I would just say that it was another. Other teams find a way to open 4-1, and I dislike all of those factors. You are correct.
Just talk over yourself.
Or that. But no, but I mean, just this has been a trend.
I'm
with
not
this
making
coaching
excuses.
Staff,
I'm just pointing out, like, looking back at the beginning of the season, especially because the Patriots loss was so bad, people just thought, oh, and they lost to the Commanders, so the Commanders are fucking great. So it's like, I don't know.
It's fair.
Now we're just talking nonsense. All right, good stuff. Make sure to check out the full Week 10 preview that went up earlier today with the great Jordan Rodrigue. Coming up tomorrow morning, exclusively on the Patreon, we have the draft of Week 10, and then, of course, Sunday night, the flagship program, Week 10 coverage in bulk. Gotta love it. Thanks to everybody for listening. Until next time, heed the call.